Two strangers lock eyes in the chaos of Seoul's busiest airport, a black woman chasing a new life and a Korean businessman racing between flights. One smile turns into a fleeting connection, then fate rips them apart before they can even exchange numbers. But destiny isn't finished with them yet, and when they meet again, it's clear some goodbyes are never meant to be said. Sit back and enjoy. The airport was alive with noise. People hurried past, pulling big suitcases. Announcements echoed in both Korean and English. The smell of coffee drifted through the air. Linda stood in the middle of Seoul's Incheon airport, holding her passport tightly. She had been on a long flight from Lagos, and her legs felt heavy. She was here for a new life, a job, a chance to start fresh. But first, she had to wait for her next flight. She found a seat near the large glass windows. Outside, planes moved slowly across the runway. The sky was gray, promising rain. Linda pulled her scarf tighter around her neck. She was tired, but her eyes kept moving, scanning faces. Airports were strange places, full of strangers, yet you felt connected to them somehow. A voice caught her attention. Fast, low, hurried Korean. She turned. A young man in a neat black suit stood at the counter nearby, speaking quickly to the airline staff. His hair was neatly styled, his tie perfect, but his face looked tense. He was holding a ticket in one hand and tapping his phone with the other. Their eyes met. Just for a second. It wasn't planned, but it felt important. Like the moment held something bigger than both of them. He gave a small, polite smile. She smiled back. Something inside her chest shifted, warm and strange. She didn't know his name. He didn't know hers. But they were both waiting at the same gate. The same flight number flashed on the screen above them. Linda didn't usually start conversations with strangers. But today, something told her this might be different. She stood, walked to the coffee shop just next to the gate, and ordered a latte. When she turned, he was right behind her in the line. They laughed quietly when the cashier mixed up their orders. That laugh became a few words. Those few words became a conversation. He spoke some English, she knew a little Korean, and somehow they understood each other. His name was Jisoo. He was flying to Busan for business. He said he was nervous about a big meeting. Linda told him she was moving to Daegu to start her new job. First time in Korea? He asked. Yes, she said. First time ever. They sat near the window with their coffee, trading stories. He told her about Seoul winters and spicy tteokbokki. She told him about Lagos traffic and Sunday jollof rice. Time passed without them noticing. The boarding call echoed overhead. They both looked at the screen. Still time left. Enough time for one more laugh. Enough time for one more story. Or so they thought. The second boarding announcement came sooner than they expected. People around them began gathering their bags and moving toward the gate. Jisoo glanced at his watch, his brow tightening. Wait here a moment, he said, standing. I need to call my office. Very quick. Linda nodded. She sipped her coffee, watching him step away, his phone pressed to his ear. His voice was low, urgent. The line at the gate grew longer. Linda's heart beat faster for no reason she could explain. She didn't want him to leave without saying goodbye. She didn't even have his number yet. She checked her bag again, just to keep busy. Passport, boarding pass, phone, everything was there. Then she heard it. Her name. Well, almost her name. Miss. Linda, please come to immigration counter 3. Her head jerked up. A uniformed officer was standing nearby. There is, small issue, he said politely. Her stomach sank. She followed him, glancing over her shoulder to see if Jisoo was back. But he was still on the phone, facing the other way. The immigration desk was at the far end of the terminal. The officer explained slowly, there was a missing stamp from her entry visa. It wasn't serious, but it needed fixing before she could board. She tried to stay calm, but her hands shook. The process took longer than she expected. By the time she got the corrected stamp, she ran back toward the gate, her shoes clicking loudly on the floor. The gate was almost empty. She looked for him, the black suit, the perfect tie, the polite smile. Nothing. The airline staff shook their heads when she asked if he had boarded. He left on the earlier call, one said. Linda stood there, breathless, staring at the closed gate door. She had no phone number, no email, no way to find him. It felt unreal. Just minutes ago, they were laughing over coffee. Now he was gone. She turned back toward the terminal. Thousands of faces passed by, but none of them were his. Her coffee cup was still on the small table by the window, cooling untouched. Linda sank into the chair by the window, staring at the empty seat across from her. The noise of the airport faded, replaced by the echo of their short conversation. She remembered the way Jisoo had leaned forward when she spoke, like he was listening to every word. She remembered the small crease that formed between his brows when he smiled. Now there was nothing but the low hum of people passing by and the distant sound of an announcement she didn't care to hear. She checked her phone again. No messages, of course. How could there be? They had never exchanged numbers. She wanted to laugh at herself for being so careless, but the ache in her chest wasn't funny at all. Her boarding time came. She walked down the jet bridge with her head low, still thinking of him. When she found her seat, she turned toward the aisle, watching every passenger who entered. Part of her, the foolish, hopeful part, thought maybe he'd appear at the last second, rushing down the aisle to take the seat beside her. But the seat stayed empty until a middle-aged woman with a tired smile finally sat down. The plane lifted into the clouds, Seoul fading beneath her. The thought hit her hard. She might never see him again. She shook her head, forcing herself to focus on the new life ahead. But the truth was, some meetings felt too important to be accidents. When the plane landed in Daegu, she stepped into the smaller, quieter airport. Her bag felt heavier now. The streets outside smelled of rain and roasted chestnuts. That night, in her small rented room, she unpacked her suitcase. She placed her passport on the table and froze. Inside the passport sleeve was something she didn't remember putting there. A small paper, folded twice. Her hands trembled as she opened it. It wasn't written in English. It was Korean. But at the bottom, in neat handwriting, were 3 words she could read. Find me, Jisoo. Linda's heart pounded so loudly she was sure her neighbors could hear it. She held the little paper under the light, tracing the letters with her finger. The Korean writing above the 3 English words looked like an address. Or maybe a location. She wasn't sure. She opened her translation app, her hands still trembling, and pointed her phone camera at the text. The words appeared on the screen. Han River, Tuesday, 5 p.m. Her breath caught. That was only 2 days away. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the note. Had he slipped it into her passport while she was at the coffee shop counter? Was this his way of making sure she could find him if something happened? She wanted to smile, but fear crept in. What if it was too late? What if he'd already left Seoul after his meeting? The next 2 days felt like the longest of her life. She started her new job's orientation, meeting her coworkers and learning the city streets, but her mind was always somewhere else, on the Han River at 5 p.m. When Tuesday finally came, she left work early, telling her manager she had an appointment. The subway ride to Seoul was crowded, the smell of warm bread from a bakery filling the train car. She clutched her bag and kept checking the time. When she finally reached the riverbank, the late afternoon sun was spilling gold across the water. Joggers passed by, couples strolled hand in hand, and children chased bubbles from a street performer. She scanned every face, searching for the black suit, the careful tie, the smile. Nothing. The clock on her phone turned to 5 o'clock. Then 5:05. Her stomach tightened. Maybe he wasn't coming. Maybe the note had been written days before, and she'd found it too late. At 5:15, she turned to leave. The ache in her chest was heavy now, heavier than her suitcase had been when she arrived in Korea. Then, a familiar voice. Soft, careful, right behind her. Linda. She spun around. It was him. For a moment, she couldn't speak. The world around them, the rushing river, the laughter of children, the hum of bicycles passing, all faded into a quiet blur. Jisoo was standing there, slightly out of breath, his hair ruffled by the wind. He was still wearing a suit, but his tie was loose and the top button of his shirt was undone. I thought I'd missed you, she said, her voice shaking. He gave a small smile, the kind that reached his eyes. I thought the same. They stood in silence for a few seconds, as if both of them were afraid the other might vanish again. I'm sorry I left without saying goodbye, he said. They called me to an urgent meeting. I wanted to come back, but you were gone. And I was stuck at immigration, she replied, half laughing, half sad. By the time I got back, you'd already boarded. He nodded slowly, like he was storing every word in his mind. Then he lifted a hand and showed her something small, a folded coffee shop receipt. On the back was her name, written in neat English letters. I didn't know how to reach you, he explained. So I wrote the note and slipped it into your passport when you weren't looking. Her heart warmed at the thought. I almost didn't find it, she admitted. But you did, he said softly. They decided to walk along the Han River together. The sun began to sink lower, painting the water in pink and orange. They talked about everything, her first impressions of Korea, his favorite spots in Seoul, the foods she must try. For the first time since arriving, Linda felt light, like she wasn't a stranger in a new land anymore. When they reached a small bridge, he stopped and looked at her. I don't know how long you'll be here, he said, but I want to see you again. No more missed chances. Her answer came without hesitation. Me too. And for that evening, the world felt safe. Like maybe fate had given them one more try. But fate wasn't done testing them yet. The sky over the Han River deepened into shades of lavender and gold. Streetlights began to glow, their light reflecting off the rippling water. They had been walking for nearly an hour, talking about little things, how she found the subway confusing, how he preferred black coffee over sweet drinks, how the city looked different at night. But beneath their words was something heavier, something unspoken. They stopped by a quiet spot where the sound of the water was louder than the noise of the city. Jesse leaned on the railing, his eyes fixed on the slow-moving river. Linda stood beside him. He spoke first, his voice low but steady. I don't believe in accidents, not when it comes to meeting people like you. She turned to look at him, but he kept his gaze on the water. I've met thousands of people, he continued. Airports, meetings, business trips, but I've never felt like I should stop everything just to talk to someone. Until that day. Her chest tightened. I was afraid, he admitted. Afraid that maybe I was imagining the connection. But when I saw you just now, I knew I wasn't. Linda's eyes stung. She took a slow breath before speaking. When I couldn't find you at the airport, it felt like I'd lost something important, something I hadn't even had yet. I told myself it was silly, but it wasn't. It's real. Finally, he turned to face her. The city lights shimmered in his dark eyes. I don't want to wonder what if anymore, he said softly. I like you, Linda. More than I can explain. Her lips curved into a trembling smile. I like you too, Jisoo. More than I should after knowing you for such a short time, but I do. For a moment, they just stood there, the words between them wrapping around like warmth in the cool night air. Then, without rushing, he reached for her hand. She let him take it, their fingers fitting together as if they had always been meant to. The river kept flowing, the city kept moving, but for them, time had finally slowed down. The days that followed felt like something out of a dream. Every evening after work, Linda found herself hurrying through crowded streets or quiet subway stations, always headed toward the same person, Jisoo. They met at little coffee shops tucked into narrow Seoul alleyways, at street food stalls where the air was thick with the smell of tteokbokki and grilled squid, and sometimes by the Han River again, where the water reflected the changing colors of the sky. At first, their conversations were light, favorite foods, childhood memories, funny travel stories. But soon, they began sharing more. Jisoo told her about the pressure of his family's expectations, how he had taken over part of his father's business and felt the constant weight of responsibility. He confessed that sometimes he wished he could just disappear for a week with no phone, no meetings, no deadlines. Linda shared her fears about starting over in a foreign country, her quiet battles with loneliness, and the ache of missing her family back home in Lagos. She told him about her younger sister, who still called her every other night just to make sure she was eating properly. They learned each other's routines. He knew she liked her coffee sweet but strong. She knew he always carried a notebook in his suit pocket where he scribbled down thoughts between meetings. One rainy evening, they found shelter in a small bookstore cafe. The sound of rain against the windows made the place feel like its own little world. Linda sat across from him, her chin resting on her hand. "You're different," he said suddenly. She raised an eyebrow. "Different how?" "Like, you see me," he replied, his eyes steady on hers. "Not the businessman. Not the son of someone important. Just me." Her chest warmed at his words. "And you," she said softly, "you make me feel like I belong here, even though I'm far from home." Their hands touched on the table, fingers brushing, then curling together. The rain outside kept falling, but inside, they were warm. They both knew time was a fragile thing, that their lives existed in two different worlds. But for now, neither wanted to think about goodbyes. For now, they just wanted to live in the moments they still had. Weeks turned into months, and the city began to change with the seasons. Winter melted into spring, and the streets filled with cherry blossoms, their pink petals floating in the air like little pieces of magic. Linda and Jisoo spent every moment they could together. They explored temples on quiet mornings, shared steaming bowls of kimchi stew on cold nights, and sometimes just sat by the Han River, watching the water and saying nothing at all. But life, as always, had its own plans. One evening, Jisoo arrived at their usual meeting spot with a look in his eyes she had never seen before, a mix of happiness and sadness. "I have to leave," he said softly. "There's a new project in Busan. I'll be there for at least a year." Her heart sank. "A year," she whispered. He nodded. "I didn't want to tell you until it was certain. But I don't want this to be the end." They stood there in the soft evening light, the smell of street food drifting through the air. She wanted to ask him to stay, but she knew he couldn't. And he wanted to promise he would come back soon, but they both knew life didn't always work that way. So instead, they made a different kind of promise. No matter where they were, no matter how long it had been, they would meet again at the Han River, the same spot, the same time, every year on the same date they first met. The next morning, they walked to the airport together. The same airport where it all began. The same chaos, the same rushing travelers. This time, they didn't lose each other in the crowd. This time, they hugged like they were holding on to a part of themselves. "Never goodbye," he whispered. "Never goodbye," she repeated. And as he walked toward his gate, she stood watching until he disappeared. Her heart ached, but it was a warm ache, the kind that comes when you know the story isn't over, just paused. Because somewhere out there, their paths would cross again. And when they did, it would be just like the first time. Only better. Do you believe in destiny? Let's hear your thoughts in the comment section. That was another tale from Folktales by Blizzy, where stories leave forever. If it made you smile, feel, or think, please like, share, and subscribe.